What happens when Hollywood spends millions and audiences simply refuse to show up? In 2026, some movies arrived with famous stars, powerful studios, huge budgets, and franchise names that were supposed to guarantee success. Instead, they became expensive warning signs. This list breaks down the flops, failures, and embarrassing box office collapses Hollywood would rather bury. But the biggest disaster is so shocking, it makes every other bomb look almost harmless. Dead Man's Wire. Some flops collapse loudly, but Dead Man's Wire did something almost worse. It disappeared with famous names still attached to it. On paper, this should have been the kind of adult thriller critics talk about, awards bloggers notice, and serious movie fans seek out. Directed by Gus Van Sant and featuring names like Bill Skarsgård, Al Pacino, and Coleman Domingo, the film had the ingredients of a prestige crime drama with real weight behind it. But in 2026, prestige alone was not enough to pull people into theaters. The problem was not simply that Dead Man's Wire was small. Plenty of smaller thrillers find an audience when the hook is sharp enough. The embarrassment came from the gap between the cast list and the public reaction. A film with this much talent should not feel invisible. It should create conversation, debate, curiosity, maybe even a slow-burn word-of-mouth campaign. Instead, it became the kind of release many viewers only heard about after reading flop reports. That makes Dead Man's Wire a quiet but painful entry on this list. It was not a giant studio disaster, but it proved something uncomfortable. Even respected filmmakers and legendary actors can struggle when the marketplace decides a movie feels optional. In today's Hollywood, being important is not the same as being irresistible. Return to Silent Hill. A famous horror name came back from the fog, but the audience did not follow it all the way home. Return to Silent Hill entered 2026 with a brand most horror fans already recognized. The Silent Hill name carries a heavy atmosphere. Haunted streets, psychological terror, disturbing creatures, and a video game legacy built on dread rather than cheap shocks. That should have made this a perfect modern horror comeback. Instead, it became one of the year's more awkward reminders that recognition does not always equal demand. The frustrating part is that Silent Hill should be easy to market. The visuals are creepy. The mythology is strange. The fan base is passionate. But the film struggled to turn that cult awareness into mainstream urgency. For casual audiences, it may have looked too niche. For hardcore fans, it may not have felt essential enough. And for horror viewers, spoiled by cheaper, sharper, more viral genre hits, Return to Silent Hill had to do more than simply exist. That is what makes its underperformance embarrassing. This was not an unknown horror film begging for attention. It arrived with a built-in identity, a recognizable title, and years of nostalgia behind it. But nostalgia can only open the door. The movie still has to drag people through it. In this case, the fog was thick, but the box office heat was missing. Shelter? Jason Statham-style action usually comes with a promise. Simple setup, hard punches, and a loyal audience ready to show up. Shelter tested that promise, and the result was not pretty. Released in 2026, Shelter looked like the kind of tough, no-nonsense thriller that should perform reliably, especially in a quieter early-year release window. These films do not need superhero numbers or massive cinematic universes. They just need enough grit, momentum, and star power to justify the budget. But Shelter landed softer than expected. The embarrassment comes from expectations. Action thrillers built around a familiar tough guy formula are supposed to be durable. They sell internationally, play well with older audiences, and offer exactly what the trailer promises: danger, revenge, survival, and bruising close-quarters intensity. Yet Shelter struggled to create the feeling of a must-see event. Instead of looking like a lean crowd-pleaser, it felt like another disposable action release fighting for attention in a crowded marketplace. That matters because Hollywood keeps leaning on familiar faces and familiar formulas, assuming audiences will automatically respond. But viewers have become more selective. If an action movie does not feel fresh, urgent, or intense enough for theaters, many people simply wait for streaming. Shelter proved that star-driven action cannot survive on muscle memory alone. It may not be the biggest disaster of the year, but it is one of the clearest signs that even dependable action packaging can wear out. Mercy, a sci-fi thriller with movie star muscle, should not feel this easy to ignore. But Mercy became exactly that kind of warning sign. Released in 2026, the movie had the kind of commercial ingredients studios usually love. Chris Pratt, Rebecca Ferguson, futuristic stakes, action tension, and the backing of Amazon MGM Studios. On paper, this was not some tiny experiment hoping to be discovered. It looked like a slick, mainstream sci-fi package designed to pull in audiences who wanted danger, spectacle, and star power. But that is where the embarrassment begins. Mercy had enough recognizable elements to look expensive and marketable, yet it struggled to become a true theatrical event. The problem with mid-budget sci-fi now is brutal. If it looks too familiar, audiences wait for streaming. If it feels too expensive, the box office has to justify every dollar. Mercy seemed trapped between those two worlds. It had the stars, but not the urgency. It had the premise, but not the cultural spark. That makes its underperformance especially revealing. Hollywood keeps trying to build theatrical hits out of recognizable actors and genre packaging, but audiences are becoming harder to impress. Viewers do not reject sci-fi automatically. They reject sci-fi that feels optional. In an era where streaming offers endless choices, a theatrical sci-fi film has to feel immediate, bold, and impossible to miss. Mercy did not fail because audiences hate the genre. It failed because it never gave them a powerful enough reason to leave the house. 28 years later, The Bone Temple. This is the kind of flop that should worry studios more than a bad movie bombing. Because 28 years later, The Bone Temple had respect, recognition, and reviews on its side. Released in 2026, it arrived connected to one of modern horror's most respected legacies. The 28 Days Later universe was never just about infected people running through empty streets. It was about panic, collapse, isolation, and the terrifying idea that civilization could vanish almost overnight. That history gave The Bone Temple real weight before audiences even saw a frame. And yet, strong critical attention did not translate into a wide box office rush. That is what makes this entry so fascinating. When a poorly reviewed movie fails, Hollywood can blame quality. But when a respected franchise title with strong reviews still underperforms, the excuse becomes harder. Maybe the audience connection had faded. Maybe the market for bleak theatrical horror was smaller than expected. Maybe the title sounded more like an extension than a must-see chapter. The embarrassing part is not that The Bone Temple had no value. It clearly had craft and pedigree. The embarrassment is that prestige horror cannot survive on reputation alone. A beloved legacy can create curiosity, but it cannot force momentum. In 2026, this film proved that even respected franchises can return to a world that has quietly moved on. Greenland 2: Migration. A disaster sequel is supposed to sell one simple emotion: survival at impossible scale. Greenland 2: Migration had the destruction, the danger, and the recognizable brand, but the box office impact felt strangely small. The film followed the surprise success story of Greenland, a pandemic-era thriller that found an audience when many viewers were stuck at home and hungry for high-stakes escapism. The sequel should have arrived with built-in momentum. Instead, it exposed how difficult it is to turn a streaming-era success into theatrical confidence. The problem was not that the concept lacked drama. A world in crisis, families on the move, and humanity fighting for survival are all powerful ingredients. But Greenland 2: Migration carried a reported large budget, and disaster movies need scale to justify themselves. When the audience turnout does not match that scale, the numbers start looking brutal very quickly. What might have worked as a tense home viewing experience suddenly looked risky on the big screen. That is why this flop feels so instructive. Hollywood often assumes that if audiences watched something once, they will pay to continue it later. But viewing behavior has changed. A movie can be popular at home and still struggle theatrically. Greenland 2. Migration became a painful reminder that not every survival story survives the box office. Good luck, have fun, don't die. A title this wild should have made people curious. Instead, Good luck, have fun, don't die became the kind of movie that sounded louder than its box office. Released in 2026, this action, adventure, comedy, and sci-fi mix had the kind of strange energy that should have attracted viewers looking for something different. It was not another superhero sequel. It was not another safe franchise revival. It had a weird title, genre chaos, and enough theatrical space to make an impression. But that is what makes the underperformance sting. When a movie gets a wide release, the expectation is simple. People need to notice it. Good luck, have fun, don't die struggled to turn its oddball identity into real audience urgency. The title may have been memorable, but memorable is not the same as marketable. If viewers do not instantly understand why they should buy a ticket, curiosity fades fast. That is why this belongs near the top. Hollywood keeps asking audiences to support original or unusual movies, but those films still need sharp marketing, clear stakes, and a reason to feel essential. Good luck, have fun, don't die had personality. What it lacked was momentum. And in 2026, personality alone could not save it. The Bride. And then there is The Bride, the kind of Hollywood flop that feels almost engineered to become a cautionary tale. This was not a small film, quietly missing its audience. It was a major Warner Brothers monster movie swing, built around one of horror cinema's most recognizable ideas, and packaged with enough style, talent, and studio confidence to suggest a bold new franchise play. On paper, it had everything Hollywood says it wants. Classic IP, modern attitude, recognizable names, and a concept audiences already understood. But the opening told a much colder story. A famous monster myth does not automatically become a box office event just because a studio gives it a glossy new identity. The Bride had the burden of looking expensive, sounding familiar, and still needing to convince viewers it was urgent. That is a dangerous combination. If audiences sense a film is more like a brand exercise than a must-see experience, they stay home. And for a movie carrying a major budget, a weak opening is not just disappointing, it is a public alarm bell. That is why The Bride earns the #1 spot. It represents the exact problem haunting Hollywood in 2026. Studios keep believing familiar properties can be revived through style and spending, but audiences are demanding stronger reasons. The Bride did not just stumble, it exposed how expensive nostalgia becomes when nobody shows up. So which flop shocked you the most? The expensive documentary, the failed sequel, or the monster movie Hollywood thought was bulletproof? 2026 has already proved one thing. Big names, huge budgets, and familiar brands no longer guarantee survival. Tell us which movie deserved to fail, which one deserved better, and which upcoming release might be next.